At a forward operating base deep in the desert, a quiet woman moved alone through the hangar, meticulously cleaning the 30mm chain gun of an AH-64 Apache. To most, she was just background noise, sleeves rolled up, eyes down, focused on her job. She was simply the Armory tech, seemingly invisible and unnoticed, until a decorated pilot rushed in and spotted the faded, ancient, classified black and gold patch on her sleeve. His face shifted from indifference to disbelief. Word spread like wildfire. Higher-ups started arriving, some veterans even backed away, while others saluted without quite realizing why. She never looked up. She just kept cleaning. Dawn broke over forward operating base Vanguard, painting the sky in hues of amber and gold. The desert air still held the night's chill as tech specialist Zeph Thorne moved through the aircraft hangar with practiced precision. As always, she was the first one in. The massive AH-64 Apache loomed before her, its 30mm chain gun awaiting her attention. The rest of the base, for the most part, was still asleep while Zeph worked. Her routine never changed. She'd arrive before sunrise to claim these quiet moments for herself. She pulled her toolbox closer and began the meticulous process of disassembling the weapon system. Her movements were efficient, economical, nothing wasted. Each piece of the M230 chain gun was removed with the confidence of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. Her hands moved almost independently of thought, allowing her eyes to occasionally scan the hangar entrance, always watching, always alert. Despite her deliberately unremarkable appearance, the sound of distant voices signaled the end of her solitude. She continued working as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the high windows of the hangar, illuminating specks of dust in the air. As the base came to life, young mechanics filtered in, loud and laughing about something that happened in the barracks last night. One noticed Zeph and nudged his friend. "Morning, General Dust Mop," he said with an exaggerated salute. The others chuckled. Zeph didn't react, continuing her work as if she hadn't heard a thing. When she reached for a specialized tool, the sleeve of her uniform pulled back slightly, revealing a small scar on her wrist. The kind that definitely doesn't come from mechanical work. She'd been at Vanguard for almost 7 months now. Before that, it was Forward Operating Base Condor for 5 months, and Joint Base Reynolds before that. Always in supporting roles, always in the background, the perfect place to be invisible. A group of pilots walked through the hangar on their way to the briefing room. Not one of them acknowledged her presence. She was just part of the landscape, like the tools on the wall or the warning signs above the fueling station. Just another component in the massive machine of war. In the mess hall during lunch, she sat alone. A sergeant placed his tray down at her table, then noticed her, and simply moved to another spot without a word. She ate mechanically, her eyes constantly moving, taking in everything around her. In the supply depot later, she was handing in requisition forms when a lieutenant walked up and, somewhat rudely, interrupted her mid-sentence to ask the clerk about his own order. The clerk immediately turned his attention to the officer, leaving Zeph standing there, form in hand, invisible once again. She returned to the hangar by early afternoon. Captain Reeve Calloway, the hangar commander, approached with a clipboard. He was young for his rank, with the sharp edges of someone trying a bit too hard to prove himself worthy of his position. "Thorne, I need this Apache ready by 1400. "Colonel's orders," he stated, his tone dismissive, almost as if he were speaking to a vending machine. "And try not to screw it up this time." Now here's the thing, she'd never once made a mistake in her work, not a single time, but Calloway just walked away without waiting for any acknowledgement, already focused on something else. Zeph returned to her work, rolling up her sleeves in the warming air. On her upper arm, partially hidden by the uniform fabric, was a faded patch, black and gold. Its design was intricate, but clearly worn by time. She normally kept it completely covered, but the desert heat made that difficult. The hangar bustled with activity by mid-morning. Pilots prepared for missions. Mechanics worked on various aircraft. The noise level rose with the temperature, voices and tools creating a symphony of military efficiency. Zeph, amidst it all, remained focused on the Apache's gun system, seemingly invisible. Major Tavish Blackwood rushed in, running a bit late for a briefing. He was a decorated pilot with the confident stride of someone accustomed to respect. His flight suit was adorned with patches that told the story of a distinguished career. Combat missions, special qualifications, unit insignias, authority radiated from him naturally, unlike Calloway's somewhat forced command presence. As Blackwood hurried past Zeph, something suddenly caught his eye. He stopped abruptly, nearly dropping his helmet. His head turned slowly, eyes fixed on a point on her arm. He stared at the patch, now partially visible beneath her rolled sleeve. His expression shifted from hurried indifference to stunned disbelief. "Is that?" he began, his voice barely audible above the hangar noise. "Is that patch real?" Zeph didn't look up, just continued reassembling a component of the firing mechanism. After a moment that stretched just a bit too long, she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Blackwood placed his helmet down slowly, approaching with newfound caution, his earlier rush completely forgotten. "Eagle Talon Division," he whispered. "You were Talon?" She remained silent, her hands still moving with mechanical precision. "That's not possible," Blackwood continued, mostly to himself. All Talon operatives were reported KIA after Samaran. Zeph finally paused her work, looking up at him with eyes that suddenly seemed far older than her appearance would suggest. She said nothing, but her look silenced him immediately. There was a weight to her gaze that no regular technician should possess. Blackwood straightened involuntarily, almost coming to attention. "I'll be discreet," he said quietly, then retrieved his helmet and left with one final backward glance. Throughout the day, the atmosphere in the hangar shifted subtly. Blackwood spoke urgently to other senior officers in corners. Groups formed, stealing glances at Zeph. Some veterans immediately recognized the significance of the patch when it was pointed out. Others remained confused, but sensed the change. Captain Calloway noticed the strange behavior, watching from across the hangar as a colonel he'd never seen before. Walked through the main doors, accompanied by two stern-looking men in unmarked uniforms. "What's going on?" Calloway asked a lieutenant, who just shook his head in disbelief. "That woman," the lieutenant whispered. "The one cleaning the Apache? She's wearing a Talon patch." "A what?" Calloway scoffed. "Eagle Talon Division, the most classified unit in Special Ops history. They were ghosts, went places even Delta Force wouldn't touch." "That's ridiculous. She's just a tech. Been here for months," Calloway insisted. "That's what makes it so strange," the lieutenant replied. "If it's real, she's not just some tech. She's a ghost." Calloway's confidence wavered as he noticed senior officers gathering, all focused on the unremarkable woman he'd been ordering around for months, the woman he'd ignored and dismissed, the woman who'd been maintaining million-dollar weapon systems without ever making a single error. By late afternoon, the hangar had developed an unusual quiet. Normal operations continued, but conversations were hushed. Every eye eventually found its way to Zeph, who continued working as if nothing had changed. A group of young airmen, who normally joked loudly near the tool crib, stood in uncharacteristic silence. When Zeph walked past them to retrieve a calibration device, they straightened their posture without even seeming to realize it. The day ended with Zeph still working, seemingly oblivious to the growing tension around her. She completed the reassembly of the chain gun, performing a function check with practiced ease. But those watching closely enough might notice that her movements had changed subtly, more alert, more ready. The pretense of being ordinary had begun to slip away. As she packed her tools for the day, she glanced toward the hangar entrance, where two military police officers had taken up positions. They weren't there this morning. She looked at the patch on her arm, then pulled her sleeve down to cover it completely. She knew the quiet days were ending. The whispers would become questions. The questions would become orders, and what she'd been preparing for all these months would finally begin. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through the high windows of the hangar, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Base Commander Colonel Austin Mercer arrived with his aide, ostensibly for a routine inspection. His weathered face gave nothing away as his eyes immediately found Zeph working on the Apache. Colonel Mercer wasn't a man who visited hangars without reason. His presence alone caused personnel to stand straighter, voices to lower. He studied the patch on Zeph's arm for a long moment, before whispering to his aide, who nodded once and hurriedly left. Zeph continued working, but her body language had shifted slightly. Her movements remained precise, but there was a new tension in her shoulders. She was aware of being watched, aware of what was coming. 3 military intelligence officers entered the hangar minutes later, speaking briefly with Colonel Mercer, before positioning themselves near the exit. They wore standard uniforms but carried themselves differently, hunters among soldiers. The regular personnel sensed the tension and gave the Apache a wide berth. Major Blackwood approached Colonel Mercer, standing at attention briefly before speaking in hushed tones. "Sir, is it really her?" "We're confirming now," Mercer responded quietly. "Pentagon's pulling the classified files. If it's genuine, this changes everything about Operation Sandstorm. If she's who that patch suggests," Blackwood said, glancing toward Zeph, "she should be running this base, not maintaining our aircraft." Mercer's expression remained neutral. "If she's who that patch suggests, Major, there's a reason she's not." Zeph finished reassembling the Apache's gun system. Her movements were precise and confident, even under the weight of dozens of watching eyes. She wiped her hands on a rag and turned to face the growing crowd. For the first time since arriving at Vanguard, she stood fully upright, no longer adopting the slightly hunched posture of someone trying to avoid notice. Colonel Mercer's aide returned, slightly out of breath, and whispered something in his ear. Mercer's expression shifted from skepticism to genuine shock. He straightened his uniform and approached Zeph directly, stopping at a respectful distance. The hangar fell completely silent. Even the distant sound of aircraft on the tarmac seemed muted, as if the world itself was holding its breath. "Lieutenant Colonel Thorne," Mercer said formally, his voice carrying in the quiet space. "The Pentagon confirmed your identity 20 minutes ago." Younger personnel gasped. The mechanics who mocked her earlier looked stunned. Captain Calloway, watching from near the tool station, went pale. "Eagle Talon Division. Operation Midnight Protocol," Mercer continued. 7 confirmed deep shadow missions across 3 continents. 3 congressional medals of honor, classified under presidential directive. The only survivor of the Samarand incident. With each phrase, the atmosphere in the hangar grew heavier. Some of the older veterans exchanged knowing glances. One master sergeant near the back unconsciously raised his hand in a salute before catching himself. "You were reported KIA 5 years ago, ma'am," Mercer continued. "Why are you here?" Zeph spoke for the first time in front of the assembled personnel. Her voice was steady but rough, from disuse. "Because dead women don't get asked questions, and I needed the quiet." Her eyes scanned the hangar, taking in every face, every reaction. "I needed to disappear while I figured out who betrayed my team." "Your team was ambushed during an extraction," Mercer said. "Intelligence indicated a security leak from within Talon itself." "Not from within Talon," Zeph corrected him. "From within this base." A murmur ran through the gathered personnel. "Vanguard wasn't operational 5 years ago," Mercer said, confusion crossing his face. No, but 60% of your staff transferred from Joint Base Archer, which was... Zeph stepped closer to the Apache's navigation system. May I, Colonel? After a moment's hesitation, Mercer nodded. Zeph activated the system and entered a series of commands that shouldn't have been accessible to a maintenance technician. The screen illuminated with a map showing troop movements and communication patterns. For the past 7 months, I've been tracking encrypted communications moving through Vanguard systems. Someone here has been passing classified flight patterns and operational details to a private military corporation called Obsidian Hand. Major Blackwood stepped forward. Obsidian Hand is a defense contractor. They provide security for half-hour diplomatic missions overseas. They're also selling weapons technology to hostile states. Zeph replied, "My team discovered their operation during a routine surveillance mission in Samarkand. When we had enough evidence to bring them down, they eliminated us. At least they thought they did." The hangar erupted in controlled chaos. Senior officers gathered around Zeph as she began explaining the data on the screen, pointing out patterns of communication that coincided with compromised missions. Captain Colloway watched from a distance, his earlier arrogance replaced by shock and embarrassment. The young mechanics who mocked her stood at rigid attention whenever she glanced their way. "How did you survive, Samarkand?" one of the intelligence officers asked. Zeph's expression darkened. "I was separated from my team during the initial attack. By the time I fought my way back to the extraction point, they were already gone. I found their bodies 3 days later." She paused, the weight of memory evident in her posture. "I spent 2 years gathering intelligence on Obsidian while officially dead. When I traced their operation to Vanguard, I requested transfer here as a technician. Low profile, access to communication systems, and plenty of time to monitor suspicious activity." "And the Apache?" Mercer asked. "Why this specific aircraft?" "Because this isn't just any Apache," Zeph replied. "This particular aircraft was recently fitted with the prototype for the new Hawkeye targeting system, a system that Obsidian helped develop. I've been modifying it to intercept and decrypt their secure communications." Zeph removed the patch from her sleeve, studying it for a moment. The black and gold insignia seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "This shouldn't have been seen, but since it has," she said, handing the patch to Blackwood. "The mission isn't over. They're coming. You need to prepare." "Who's coming?" Mercer asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "The same people who killed my team. They've been looking for me for 5 years." She turned to the Apache. "And now they found me." As if to punctuate her statement, the distant sound of an explosion rolled across the base. Alarms began to wail. "That's the north perimeter," Mercer said, already moving toward the communication station. "All personnel, battle stations. This is not a drill." The base transformed from routine operation to high alert in seconds. Officers shouted orders. Personnel ran to predetermined position. Through it all, Zeph stood calmly by the Apache, watching the organized chaos with the eye of someone who has seen far worse. Major Blackwood returned to her side. "They hit us at shift change. Maximum confusion. Standard Obsidian tactics," Zeph confirmed. "They'll have a primary strike team targeting this hangar. Specifically, this Apache contains the only proof of their entire network." "How many should we expect?" Blackwood asked. "At least 20 operators, former special forces, well-equipped, highly trained." Blackwood glanced at the patch in his hand, then back to Zeph. "No offense, ma'am, but one Talon operative and a hangar full of support personnel aren't going to hold off 20 elite mercenaries." For the first time, Zeph allowed herself a small smile. "You're right, Major." She reached into her toolkit and removed a false bottom, revealing a compact sidearm and combat knife. That's why we're not going to be here when they arrive. As darkness fell over Vanguard, we see Zeph at the center of it all, directing preparations, no longer invisible. The woman everyone ignored now commanded the attention of the entire base. The transformation was complete, the disguise discarded. The ghost had returned to the world of the living, and she'd brought a storm with her. Dawn broke over the base once more, painting the sky in hues of amber and gold. Zephyrin Thorne stood on the flight line, watching Apache helicopters prepare for takeoff. The transformation was complete. Gone was the hunched posture and downcast eyes of the maintenance technician. She stood tall now, dressed in proper combat gear, her former authority fully restored. The black and gold patch was visible on her shoulder, no longer hidden. The night had passed in a blur of preparations. After the initial attack on the perimeter, Obsidian's forces had pulled back to regroup. Intelligence suggested they would return at first light. With reinforcements, the base had used the reprieve to fortify defenses and evacuate non-essential personnel. Captain Reeve Calloway approached hesitantly. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by an awkward deference. He stopped at a respectful distance, clearing his throat. "I didn't know," he began, the words clearly difficult for him. "You weren't supposed to," she interrupted, her voice calm. "That was the point. I treated you like—" he struggled to find the right words. "Like I was invisible, that's what I needed," she said, turning to face him directly. The rising sun caught the angles of her face, highlighting the strength that was always there, hidden beneath a carefully constructed mask of ordinariness. But not anymore. Calloway stood straighter, finding his professionalism again. "What can I do?" Zeph studied him for a moment. "Acings. Your maintenance crews respect you. I need them at their best today. Every aircraft we can get airborne gives us an advantage." He nodded, purpose replacing shame. "You'll have them, ma'am." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Save the apologies for later, Captain. We have work to do." Calloway nodded and left with new determination in his stride. Zeph watched him go, then returned her attention to the flight line, where technicians were performing final checks on the combat helicopters. Major Blackwood approached now in full flight gear. The eagle talon patch was affixed to his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that didn't go unnoticed by Zeph. "Aircraft is ready, Colonel," he said. He hesitated, then added, "I flew 3 extraction missions looking for Talon survivors after Samarand. We never found anyone." "You weren't supposed to," Zeph replied, "but I appreciate that you looked." The distant sound of vehicles drew their attention. Colonel Mercer arrived in a Humvee, accompanied by his intelligence team. His expression was grim as he approached. "Satellite shows multiple assault teams converging on our position," he reported. "ETA 15 minutes. We've got 2 Apaches ready for immediate takeoff. 2 more can be airborne in 20 minutes. "We only need 1, Zeph said, nodding toward the Apache she'd been maintaining for months. "That's our ticket out of here." "Out of here?" Mercer questioned. "The Pentagon ordered us to hold position until reinforcements arrive." "With respect, Colonel, reinforcements won't get here in time. Obsidian has too many resources, too many connections. The only way to end this is to get that data to CENTCOM directly." Mercer looked unconvinced. "You're talking about abandoning this base." "I'm talking about completing the mission," Zeph countered. "This isn't about it's about exposing a network that's compromised our entire military intelligence apparatus." A tense silence followed. Finally, Mercer nodded. "What do you need?" Inside the command center, Zeph pointed to satellite imagery showing movement in the desert surrounding the base. Red dots indicated enemy forces closing in from multiple directions. They call themselves Obsidian Hand. They're a private military corporation that's been infiltrating government contracts for decades. My team discovered they were selling classified tech to hostile states. When we had enough evidence, they tried to wipe us out. Why didn't you report to command after surviving? An intelligence officer asked. Because I didn't know how high the infiltration went. So I disappeared, took the lowest profile positions I could find, and watched, she said, indicating the base around them. 3 months ago, I spotted one of their operatives here. That's when I requested transfer to Apache maintenance. You knew they were coming, Blackwood realized. Zeph nodded. The Apache's targeting system contains the final piece of evidence I need to expose their entire network. I've been modifying it to decrypt their communications. She pulled up a schematic on the main display. The Hawkeye system isn't just for targeting. It's the most sophisticated data collection platform ever installed on a combat helicopter. Every transmission it intercepts is logged and encrypted. What Obsidian doesn't know is that I've been using their own encryption keys against them. Another explosion rocked the building closer this time. Dust fell from the ceiling. They're here, Zeph said calmly. The command center erupted into activity. Mercer began issuing orders for defensive positions. Zeph checked her weapon, then turned to Blackwood. We need to get to that Apache now. They moved quickly through the corridors, the sound of gunfire growing louder. Outside, the base was under attack from multiple directions. Smoke rose from several buildings. Defense teams returned fire from fortified positions, but they were outnumbered. Zeph and Blackwood reached the hangar to find it under guard by a squad of Marines. The Apache sat ready, its systems already powered up by the ground crew. Situation? Zeph asked the squad leader. Enemy forces have breached the south wall. They're making a push toward this position. Hold them as long as you can. Once we're airborne, fall back to secondary positions. The Marine nodded. Yes, ma'am. Zeph boarded the Apache with Major Blackwood as her pilot. Around them, the ground crew completed final preparations, despite the danger. You remember how to fly combat missions, Colonel? Blackwood asked as they strapped in. Zeph allowed herself the smallest smile. Some things you don't forget. The engines roared to life as the canopy closed. Through the reinforced glass, they saw the Marines taking defensive positions around the hangar entrance. Tower, this is Ghost 1, requesting immediate takeoff clearance. Blackwood radioed. Ghost 1, Tower, you are cleared for immediate takeoff. Good hunting. The Apache rose smoothly from the ground. Below them, the battle intensified. Enemy forces had reached the outer buildings, exchanging fire with base defenders. From this height, Zeph could see the full scope of the attack. At least 50 combatants, professional and well-equipped. They really want you dead, Blackwood commented as he maneuvered the helicopter away from the base. They want what's in this targeting system. Zeph corrected him. My death would just be a bonus. As they cleared the base perimeter, warning indicators flashed across the console. Surface-to-air missile lock, Blackwood announced, his voice steady. Deploying countermeasures. The Apache banked sharply as flares deployed from its underside. The missile veered off course, detonating harmlessly in the distance. We've got company, Zeph said, pointing to radar contacts approaching from the east. 2 helicopters, unmarked. Obsidian air support. Blackwood confirms. Can we outrun them? Zeph switched to the weapon system. We won't have to. The Apache turned to face the approaching threat. Through the targeting system, Zeph acquired a lock on the lead helicopter. Ghost 1 to base. We have engaged hostile aircraft, Blackwood reported. Proceeding with mission objective after neutralizing threat. Copy that, Ghost 1. Mercer's voice came through the radio. Be advised, reinforcements are 30 minutes out. We'll be back before then, Zeph promised. The targeting system beeped confirmation of a solid lock. Fire when ready, she told Blackwood. The Apache shuddered as missiles launched from its hard points. The enemy helicopter attempted evasive maneuvers, but couldn't break the lock. The explosion was bright against the morning sky. The second helicopter veered away, retreating quickly. They'll be back with more, Blackwood said. Then we'd better hurry. Zeph activated the specialized system she'd modified over the past months. The display filled with encrypted data streams, setting course for CENTCOM. We need to deliver this data personally. As the Apache flew toward the rising sun, Zeph looked back at the base one last time. The woman everyone ignored now commanded the skies. The battle continued below, but she knew the real fight was just beginning. 5 years hiding, Zeph said, checking her systems one final time. Ends today. The helicopter increased speed, racing against time and pursuing enemies. The black and gold patch caught the sunlight as they flew, a symbol of a unit that officially never existed, worn by a woman who officially died years ago. Some heroes live in shadows by choice. They carry the weight of classified truths and unacknowledged sacrifices. They never ask for recognition, even when they deserve it more than anyone else. And sometimes, when the moment demands it, they step back into the light, reminding everyone that the quietest among us may carry the heaviest burdens. For Lieutenant Colonel Zephyrin Thorne, the time for silence had passed. The ghost had returned, not to haunt, but to finish what she started, to bring justice for her fallen team, to expose those who would betray their country for profit. And as the Apache disappeared into the distance, those who once ignored her now stood in awe of her courage, her sacrifice and her unwavering commitment to a mission that never ended.